Hello, and hi, how's it going? My name's Gabriel, and we're wrapping up the month of January with my last and final book review, which is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So, if the name Andy Weir does sound familiar, he is also the same author that wrote The Martian, which later was turned into a movie, so even if you don't read that many books, you honestly probably have seen, heard, or just at least kind of know what The Martian is, which is where you have an astronaut that was stranded on Mars and had to kind of survive, primarily through using his own excrement in order to grow potatoes, which, surprisingly, as some videos that I have watched have shown me, actually would be possible. Would it be the best for you? No, probably not. Is quality of life there? No, probably not. But I think that this book does parallel it in some ways, but we will cover that later on. So the initial premise of the book is there is a scientist or, ex-school teacher that wakes up abandoned on a ship, kind of has no memory or recollection of where he is. But as he starts to explore the vessel that he's on more, he starts to kind of remember, comprehend, piece together all of the kind of puzzle pieces that are left around him. And then also as he's piecing together more things, there are certain things that are going to cause flashbacks, which just kind of help him remember who he is, and what was happening. And then there is some stuff later in the book that I don't necessarily want to kind of ruin the surprise of it or kind of make it to where there is no shocking reveal for you to an extent, but I will say that there is a large use of scientific elements throughout the course of the book, and as a mechanical engineering major myself, we're senior year of mechanical engineering where I graduate in the spring, so just a few months from now, I do feel like it was an accurate portrayal, and seeing how well Andy Weir was able to write out the thought process of someone with a more scientific background and how they might have the analytical thinking skills and the ability to extrapolate information from around them and apply that into the situation that they are, or apply it into different contexts and different abilities, to where I might look at kind of the composition of a material or the actions that are done by a certain being, and I might be able to adapt that into figuring out kind of the operational structure or how I would be able to leverage that material to my benefit, or leverage things that I'm observing to act as a barrier for communication or a barrier for protection for me and other things. So I do realize that kind of sounded like a ton of rambling, but it could just be kind of shortened into, I really did appreciate the ability that Andy Weir put in the book of showing that you can take information that's surrounding you, extrapolate or kind of break it down into what you think applies to certain scenarios or can apply to certain things, and then kind of translate that information that you've been breaking down and apply it into situations that you would. I think that it is a very good kind of thought process to see if you're someone not from a scientific background, because it can just help you in general life have a deeper understanding and a deeper ability to do this. Or maybe it starts you down a train of thoughts that you would have otherwise not thought of, just based on the fact that sometimes people are more creative focused or they are more art focused, where they look at the form of something and they look at how the form itself speaks to them. Versus, I think if you're of a scientific background, you kind of might look at the form of something, you might kind of break it down into its elements and then translate the elements into something completely different, where you could completely change the medians or change what the elements are corresponding to or what the elements are used for into something else. Instead of looking at the elements from an artistic perspective, taking the elements and then translating it into another artistic element. I think that when you look at changing the kind of surrounding or the context of something, that it's often a very hard thing, versus if you're keeping something within the same context or the same medium. Then I do think that this book also could help people if they want to kind of think about science a little bit and they don't want to go into something that's super heavy literature based. I have watched some videos from Wes Henderson. I will try and link his channel up above or the video up above, maybe both, but I think that he made a fantastic point in his review where it was, listen, here's the book. It does a great job at explaining kind of scientific principles and making it a easily digestible way, especially if you're not someone that likes analytical or nonfiction books. For example, the current book I'm reading is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've also read Digital Minimalism. I've done a lot of like self-help books and a lot of psychology books. So I'm kind of used to a more dry subject matter maybe, where the creativity isn't necessarily there, or you're not reading it for the story, you're reading it for the principles and how to apply it. So I don't read the most fiction, but I think that Project Hail Mary was a fantastic book of fiction, and you could read it for the scientific principles, and you would actually really enjoy it, even if you don't necessarily like scientific heavy stuff. I do think that I will have to throw the Martian into future rotations for me, just because of how well this book did do, and any future works from Andy Weir I would love to see. Additionally, I think this book is great even if you're from a scientific background, just because you can kind of see scenarios that you wouldn't think about mostly, like being stranded on a ship, or being stranded on a space shuttle, and just kind of having to figure out what was around you. Would this be a applicable situation to what might happen someday? I don't know. I think it would be scary, but with Elon Musk trying to conquer Mars, maybe The Martian and Project Hail Mary are both things where we're going to have to look into kind of figuring out and experiencing as humans ourselves. Because what if I'm put into a medically induced coma on a spaceship to Mars? For Elon Musk, I wake up with no recollection of how I got on that spaceship or where I'm going, but I'll have to figure it out. I think it would be an interesting situation or an interesting thing to do. But I would absolutely recommend that people go to their library, go to a local bookstore, go to Amazon, something like that, pick up a copy of Project Hail Mary, take the time to read through it, easily digest it. I'm not going to lie, the first half of the book I went through very slowly, but I was also distracted with classes. But when I did have the time where I could actually put the mental capacity into just enjoying the reading and not thinking about all of the assignments that I'm extremely far behind on and worrying about, I actually really enjoyed the book, and it did turn into somewhat of a page turner for me. And I think a lot of the principles of the book are very well adapted. I do think that one of the things that this book did versus what I had heard about The Martian is this book, Project Hail Mary, did do a better job talking about the effects of isolation on a person, where the scientist in this book does end up waking up alone on the spacecraft. And I believe from the get-go it kind of sets in where the effects of isolation and being alone, especially with that amount of duration and time passed, start to affect him, where he starts to get nervous, he starts to get anxious, he starts to get more of that anxiety. And I think that the book really works to kind of demonstrate and show the effects of loneliness on a person as well as isolation on a person, which the only reason that this really stuck out as relevant and stuff to me is I did just read Digital Minimalism, where they do kind of explain some of the effects of social isolation and how they affect someone mentally and physically. And then I did see it kind of paralleled and how it applied in this book, where there is a robotic system in the book that does take care of him, like it gives him food and it can do other things for him, but it's not necessarily social interaction. So when you look at and you think about his mental state, it's not necessarily recovering from that point. It is just kind of staying at a certain one. It does kind of drop and then it picks up and it's going in waves. I think that that was better done in this book versus The Martian potentially, from some of the video breakdowns that I have watched on The Martian and the science behind it, which I believe was Film Theory. I'll try and link the video up there or up there. I don't remember which side it goes on. I'm kind of new to this more video recording where I'm facing the camera, but I will figure it out. So it's there. Come on, editing Gabe, you can get this right. But I will say that those videos, they said, although from a nutritional standpoint, he might have been able to do it, that the effects of mental health of him being isolated on Mars would take a bigger effect on him. However, it wasn't really mentioned in The Martian. I think it was definitely mentioned in Project Hail Mary, and it was elaborated more. As well as there is more kind of like stress and question, I feel like, as you read this book. But I will be reading The Martian, or at least it's on the list to kind of go through and read that at some point. But I do think that we're starting to get a theme, and there's starting to be more of a revolution of authors throwing in more scientific elements that are accurate and translatable to real life into their books, and just applying it to situations that we might not be facing or we might not be facing yet. So I think that it makes it digestible, and it gets it turning in people's head where at least what we're reading is translatable into real life, and it's not like traditional fiction to an extent, or at least science-based fiction where there is no working principles and it might not be like replicatable into real life. For example, I don't think that a half robotic cop with the ability to shoot lasers and heat detection built into himself, i.e. RoboCop, would be translatable into real life, at least at this current point. And I think that we're missing a lot of the scientific principles if we were looking to mechanize a police officer and recreate RoboCop or the Terminator. But I do think it would be possible for someone to awake on a spacecraft and have the ability to extrapolate where they are, remember their mission, and kind of gather information from their surroundings to be able to survive. But with that being said, I did mention Wes Henderson. I would extremely recommend checking out his channel. He makes fantastic content. It's always going up. He does fantastic book reviews. So does Ali Abdul, but I did not really mention Ali in this video. But Wes Henderson, absolutely check him out. Thank you for everything you've done, for inspiring me to do more of these book reviews, switch up my content, and not kind of lock myself into one niche. So for that, I really thank you. Thank you for, honestly a lot, and thank you to anyone that's watched it this far. I really appreciate you. If you want to give a thumbs up, that would be great. If you want to subscribe, that would be even better. If not, and you just watching this random, drop something in the comments. I'd love to converse with you. But if you have any book suggestions, drop them, and I hope you guys have a great one. This has been a not very focused breakdown and discussion of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir.